All right, so we're coming to you today from the LPRC labs in beautiful Gainesville, Florida, and I'm honored to be here with Dr. Corey Lowe, the Director of Research at the Loss Prevention Research Council. Welcome, Corey.
It's very good to be with you.
It's exciting, and honestly, for me, this place is where retail security meets behavioral science.
Yes.
The perfect combo. At the moment, we're in the simulation lab, and there's a lot going on here, which we'll get into it in just a little bit. But Corey, I do want to start with some introductions, because obviously we have a lot of retail practitioners in our audience, but also beyond. We have financial industry practitioners, restaurants. So I do want to make sure that we create a little bit of awareness as far as the association. So tell us a little bit about the LPRC.
So the LPRC is 25 years strong. Historically, we've been focused on retail loss prevention and security, but we are doing more with restaurants and other sectors as well. But we're a member-based organization. We have about 113 retail members and about 160 solution provider members or tech companies. And we're doing research on issues related to theft, fraud, violence, retail operations throughout the year here in our labs and beyond.
And tell us a little bit about yourself, because I always find your story fascinating.
Well, my background is in criminology. I actually received my PhD in criminology from the University of Florida in 2020. It was an exciting time to be finishing a PhD. But there was a position that came open here. I've always been very interested in opportunities to prevent crime outside of just the criminal justice system, right? So how can I prevent crime through other means than, just the criminal justice system? So interested in the role of churches, the role of businesses, going beyond the systems that exist for criminal justice.
And I know you and I have known each other for many years, so just want to say one thing. If you don't know Corey, make sure you connect with him on LinkedIn or approach him in some other way, because he's a fantastic resource and can really assist you, not just within the retail space, but also beyond. And
so we actually have an entire team of scientists. Some are working on product protection, some are working on violence, some are working on ORC, others are working on data analytics. And so it's not just me all the time, but if you reach out to me, I can definitely get you in touch with the right people.
Exactly. So Corey, before we leave this room, what happens here usually?
So this is the Sim Lab. We have a research process where we want to start small scale, and we don't want to go in and disrupt retailer store operations. So if we have an idea for some kind of solution, we can do it in a simulated environment here. We can bring offenders and customers into this lab and interview them, ask them questions about different technologies, particularly around our see, get, fear model of deterrence. For a deterrent to have an effect, an offender first has to see it. That means they have to notice that it exists. They next have to get it or understand what it does. If they see a camera and it looks like a smoke detector to them, they're not going to respond to it as if it's a camera. So that's what we can do in a simulated environment. And then finally, they have to fear the consequences of that deterrent being in place. So they have to believe that because that deterrent or that solution is where it is, that there is a greater likelihood that they will be apprehended, investigated, prosecuted for whatever crimes they might commit while in that space. And so this is just where we get to do some of that preliminary research before we go in and start disrupting retailer stores or going and interviewing offenders in live stores.
And I just want to stress one point, because as someone who has been involved with the LPRC for, over 15 years now, and I'm lucky to be officially part of the organization now, so thank you for that. I do think that one of the things that makes us different is exactly that experimental aspect focused on testing effectiveness of security measures, which to me is what everyone is looking for, honestly, in the industry, what works, what doesn't.
And a lot of retailers do it. I put the scare quotes there because a lot of retailers do not do trials very well. Right? They oftentimes it's small scale studies, trying to get results as fast as they can so they can understand what can they do about these different things. We take a little bit more methodical approach to the research that we do than some retailers are able to do. And because we have all of these members, we have a lot larger group to work with.
Exactly, which again, very powerful And if that's not a reason to join, then I don't know what is. All right, so how about we go and check out some of your other labs?
Sounds good.
Okay, let's go.
So this is the activation lab. And this is essentially the front end of the store where we can simulate that environment and do research with customers, offenders, self-reported offenders, all those types of things. It's also a place where we can start to explore how different technologies can be combined. So self-checkout being combined with gate systems, with surveillance systems. We've got, you can't see all of it right now, but there's cameras all over this place running different analytics and things like that. So that's what we can do in this lab.
Okay. So when it comes to findings from these different studies, how do you deliver that to the members?
So in a variety of ways. So we have events all throughout the year where we can, translate the findings, explain to our members and the retail community what we found during the research. So that's one way. We also do webinars. We, of course, do all the reports that are on our Knowledge Center, where we have over 400 reports published there that people can go retrieve whenever they want to. But there's a variety of different ways that we communicate the findings.
Mm-hmm. And in terms of the events, because you mentioned that, what's coming for the LPRC that we can encourage members and beyond to attend?
There's quite a few things that we have going throughout the year. So the next thing coming up will be our kickoff and integrate event on January 14th. This is the day after Big Show, NRF Big Show in New York City. And then after that, we have our annual Impact Conference, which will be in Gainesville, March 17th to the 19th. It's our big conference of the year, and it'll be here at the University of Florida.
Yeah, and that one is honestly one of my favorite conferences, if not the favorite. And such a good way just to see what LPRC is about, because I know we're going to deliver a lot of not only research findings, but also some new tools that we're putting together for the members.
Yes.
So definitely stay tuned for that, because there's a lot coming.
Yeah.
Wow, Corey, this is fascinating. I feel like I'm in an actual retail location. This is awesome. So tell us a little bit about this room.
So this is the engagement lab. And this is where we have the mock store environment and, over 400 solutions. I think we're actually getting close to 500. But it's a place for us to understand how these solutions can actually be deployed. What are the practical considerations of using these solutions and using them in conjunction with one another. It's also a place when we have our retail members come through, it's a place for them to discover solutions that they may not be aware of or options that they may not be aware of. So we'll have our retail members come through. We'll say, okay, if you're wanting to protect, power tools, there's this solution, there's a bunch of different things that you might do in terms of product protection. There's also, once again, a ton of different cameras, a ton of analytics, things like weapons detection, gate detection, facial recognition, all kinds of different technologies deployed on the cameras as well. And we have apparel over there with RFID and various different tag solutions, all kinds of different cases over here, and a lot of different things going on here.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And before we leave this room, I want to touch a little bit on what retailers and other businesses are experiencing lately, because I do see some changes in terms of even the offender type, especially when you think about just irate customers, right?
Yes.
Or turning into offenders. So what are some of the recent trends that you're seeing from studies or just speaking with the members?
The seriousness of crime has escalated over the last several years, and that's both in terms of the amount and the severity of violent incidents that are going on, but then also with organized retail crime and just habitual offenders, just high harm offenders. To go back to the violence piece, it's not just the robbery, the instrumental use of violence as part of a crime, but there's also effective violence, which is someone gets into a heightened emotional state and then they, batter someone or assault someone because of that escalation. And so trying to keep people to de-escalate those situations is a key part of what we're trying to get retailers to do. And they do that often, but it's just still such a challenge because a lot of people seem to be on edge and irritable.
Oh, absolutely. We see that everywhere. And I think this is actually a good place to feature our working groups because if you guys are struggling with similar issues or just want to be aware of what's happening in the industry, I think that is such a good place to be, to talk to your peers, consultants, even law enforcement sometimes joins our conversations, and really use that safe platform for discussions as far as trends, but again, also effective mitigation measures.
Yeah, so we have the 8 working groups. We have product protection, retail fraud, violent crime, data analytics, retail fraud, operational excellence, supply chain protection, and the real-time intelligence working group. And I'm very proud of myself for getting all of those on the first try. But there's a lot going on. Some of those are in partnership with law enforcement. So, for example, with the real-time intelligence working group, we're actually partnered with the National Real-Time Crime Center Association. And we'll talk more about that when we get to our SOC lab. But that's a key part of what we're doing because we're really trying to bring retailers together with law enforcement to make that that communication and collaboration a little more seamless.
And that is key. And I've spoken personally to a lot of these law enforcement members or conference attendees, and they really truly do value this partnership. So you guys are really providing an amazing platform for that.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, let's keep going.
Good deal.
All right, Corey. So this looks very high tech. Tell us a little bit about this room.
So this is our SOC lab. And it does have a lot of technology streaming in. It's where we can visualize pretty much all the feeds that you would see from our other labs, the cameras that are deployed there, as well as external cameras. And so it's meant to look like a SOC or a real-time crime center where you can take all of that information flowing in and actually use it and put it to use.
Yeah, and this is where I want to touch a little bit on the law enforcement piece, but not just that, just general collaboration. Because the one thing I love about LPRC is, again, it's a platform for retail practitioners, law enforcement, solution providers, and beyond to collaborate. And I know the collaboration with law enforcement is critical. So can you expand on that a little bit?
Well, I think that we have a community here. That's what we like to describe it as a community, where we have regular engagement between all of those different groups, law enforcement, solution providers, retailers, and other industries coming in here to work together. And so as we're doing research or having discussions or whatever we're doing, the retailers are discussing their problems. Law enforcement are discussing their problems. And then the solution providers are hearing that and saying, okay, we can do this, 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 and the other. And then we come in and we say, okay, well, what's actually effective? Yeah. So it's good to understand all those trends that are out there. It's also important to understand what actually works to address those trends. And so that's generally how the community works. As you mentioned, law enforcement's a key partner. One of the challenges that we have is that law enforcement agencies want to know when they respond to a crime that there's actually something they can do about it. Right? We take the rational choice model of cost and benefits of any action to heart. Right? So we argue that offenders commit the crimes that they do because the benefits outweigh the costs. Well, we also apply that to everyone else. Customers buy things because the benefits outweigh the costs. Law enforcement responds to crimes because the benefits outweigh, all the other considerations. So if they've got to prioritize different calls, they're going to go to the calls where they can actually do something rather than those where they're just shown to take a report. Yeah. So if we can get them the information that they need to know how to respond effectively and that they will actually be able to do something beyond take a report, then that will be good. And so that's what these different kinds of fusion platforms do. They fuse things in two different senses of the word. First of all, they fuse all these different sensors together. So this is Axon's Fusus, and this is Motorola's Command Central Aware, and we have several other platforms. There's Flock OS, and there's Direct-to-Dispatch, and there's a bunch of different platforms. But the point is that you can visualize a bunch of different feeds, data points, alerts in one platform. The second sense of fusion is that under certain circumstances, if I need to share those alerts or those feeds with law enforcement so they can have greater situational awareness, I can actually share that with them in real time. So say there's an active assailant incident and we've got law enforcement responding. If you talk to law enforcement, one of the situations that they dislike the most is going into domestic violence incidents. So going into a home where they don't know what the situation is, they don't know the layout, they don't know if they're going to be ambushed. Well, that same situation exists when they go into retail stores. They don't know what they're going to go into, or if they're going into a corporate headquarters, they've never been in that building before. So giving them some context on what is where and where the shooter might be so they can navigate that space safely is absolutely critical. And so that's what we're working on here. There's also a lot of applications for ORC. So if retailers have exterior sensors and they want to share that so that, say they get a call for service for an ORC incident, well, then they can see outside of the building and they can get some contextual information and situational awareness that way as well. So.
Yeah, I think this is extremely important because the one thing I'm hearing about in the industry is there's definitely a need for not only building these more and more, but also optimizing the existing ones. So I think this is, again, a good platform to test and also to navigate potentially the noise that comes in through these, right?
And I think that's where we're doing a lot of work is I don't think that there's anywhere that has as many different types of sensors as we do on these fusion platforms. And so Josh Bush on our team, he's working with Jonathan and others to bring in all these different sensors into these platforms so they can be visualized and then actually begin to understand how these can be leveraged effectively. Because it's one thing to have the technology, it's another one to understand how these different sensors can be used in conjunction with one another. How can we use GPS trackers when they start moving and bring up all the closest cameras to those? So lots to be learned there.
Lots, and also again how to cut through the noise, especially if you get conflicting signals from different sources, right?
Yes, and so there's currently standards. So if we go back to what I was saying about the police calls for service, when they respond, it's better for them to have some kind of situational awareness. If they have greater context, then they can prioritize calls differently. So if I am able to see that there is someone on site who has a weapon and is a threat to people at that location, then clearly that's going to take priority over a situation where there's just a threat to property, right? But providing that context is critical for law enforcement to be able to respond effectively and prioritize things correctly or appropriately.
All righty. Well, thank you so much. Let's keep going.
Yep.
Okay, Corey, so we ventured outside.
Yes.
So tell us a little bit about how you're using this space for your research.
So at the LPRC, we have what we refer to as the 5 zones of influence. And it's much easier to tell you about that out here than it is inside.
Yeah.
So when we talk about the 5 zones of influence, these are areas over which retailers and other organizations have some kind of influence. And that starts with zone 5, and that's everything beyond the parking lot. Zone 4 is the parking lot. Zone 3 is the overall store interior and all egress, ingress points, exits, entrances. Zone 2 is like a general category area, and Zone 1 is the precise location of a target. So if you think about, say, power tools at a home improvement store, you have the power tool, the drill could be the target, which is nested within the power tool department, the tools department, which is nested within the store interior, which is nested within the parking lot, which is nested within a broader community, right? And for a program to be successful, you have to layer security strategies across those 5 zones of influence, right? So out in zone 5, it's working with law enforcement, working with prosecutions, working with other retailers to share intelligence and information about known offenders so that everyone can have greater awareness. Also all the investigations and everything else that happens there. But in zone 4, there's different technologies that we use to detect, affect, detect, and connect. And what we mean by that is we want to affect behavior, we want to detect offenders and offenses so that we can influence behavior. And then we want to connect everything so that we can better detect and affect. And so we have a few different technologies here, including a mobile protective unit. This one is an LVT unit. And then we have multiple different types of license plate readers. There's gunshot detection. There's different sensors that are out here. And that allows us to better detect when someone has arrived that's a known offender. So say we've got a violent offender who's now approaching the location or pulling in the parking lot, or an ORC offender. Once they pull in and we get that alert, then we can actually take appropriate action, right? So if I know a violent offender, if someone has some kind of malicious intent to come in and commit a mass casualty active assailant incident, we can begin locking down the site or evacuating or whatever we need to do given the context. And that would vary based on the situational circumstances. Same thing with the gunshot detection systems. Once we hear that gunshot, we can send that to a corporate SOC, send that to law enforcement so that they can begin acting appropriately. With organized retail offenders, once they come into the parking lot, we can begin surveilling their behaviors to gather evidence about their criminal activities so they can be apprehended and prosecuted. So all those things are absolutely essential. And so we have the interior labs, but then we have the 4 square blocks around the LPRC. And then we have things that we're doing throughout the city of Gainesville with the different agencies and the sensors that we have deployed elsewhere.
Oh, wow. So it goes beyond this setting of the lab.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
And it actually goes beyond, in terms of the organizations that we're partnering with. We're doing research and work with companies all over the country and agencies all over the country to better understand how to do all these different things.
So if a retail organization, or again, beyond, would like to work with you guys in an experiment like this at one of their locations, they could do that?
Most definitely. Okay. We're actually working on a few things with a few of these technologies right now.
Amazing.
We just wrapped up a project with license plate readers a couple of months ago. So always doing all kinds of things.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
So Corey, before we wrap up, I'm curious, you've been doing this for a number of years, right? Yeah. So is there anything that surprised you in terms of the research you've been working on?
There's been a few things. The number one thing was we did this facial recognition experiment where we asked loss prevention professionals to select these fictional suspects from a lineup of 20 people. So we showed them an image and an offense narrative for a fictional offender. And then we asked them to identify that individual from a group of 20 people, images. And they did very poorly. I think that was one of the most surprising things is how, what a poor job humans do with identifying people. And differentiating faces. Those that were assisted by facial recognition in the scenario performed much, much better. So that was one thing that was very interesting to me. I think another thing that was interesting, we did this study on these self-service locking cases where the idea is that an individual exchanges some kind of information, personally identifiable information, for access to locked merchandise. And so the idea behind this being that an offender's greatest asset is their anonymity. So if we can get them to trade their anonymity, if they do commit a crime, if they steal items out of that case, we've got some kind of information about them. So that's a pretty high cost to the offender. It's pretty low cost for your customer, right? Who's going to either have to do that or they're just going to have to wait until a customer service associate comes over and unlocks the case for them. So it's ultimately up to them what they do, whether they give the information or not. Well, the thing is that we did a survey for that. We also did mystery shoppers. And the interesting thing is that we looked at several different access options. So using your face, using fingerprint, using loyalty card information, cell phone app, cell phone number, all these different things. And there was 2 interesting things. One being that a lot of people were willing to use that information and customers were willing to use it. But the other thing was that there wasn't a lot of demographic differences in willingness to use the technology. So that was another surprising thing. But I would say those are the first two that come to mind. A lot of the times, the things that we're testing are pretty decent ideas, right? It makes sense theoretically, and then it works. Still a lot more to do. There's always the possibility that something can have a backfire effect, where because you put a technology in place that we actually technically call them iatrogenic effects, where there's a negative effect rather than a positive one. So we always want to try to rule that out. Where, say, we're putting in a technology that's for security purposes, one of the things that can do is it can be a sign of incivility to your shopper. So because that technology is there, I now associate this location with criminal activity.
Yes.
Right? So we want to avoid that, because at the end of the day, we want to be welcoming to our green guest, our shopper.
And I like that you keep bringing up the green guests, because I think that is sometimes overlooked.
It is, very much so. Like, I mean, the LP folks, this is where there's a huge opportunity for loss prevention to be more of a business partner inside the industry.
Yeah.
Right now, a lot of different parts of the businesses are interested in how these technologies can be leveraged. I mean, how can we use cameras to tell when product is out of stock on a shelf, right? Can we do that? Can we use it for all these other purposes outside of crime prevention? And it'll be very important for not just loss prevention, but all the associated and security professions to think more about how do we promote the legitimate use of a space. Yeah. Because if I can do that, then that actually enhances guardianship too, right? If I have more foot traffic and I have more people seeing things, that has the ability to increase guardianship. Foot traffic also increases the likelihood that any crime will occur, but there's always those interesting things that we got to deal with.
So much more to study, and I can't wait to dive deeper into some of these things, especially when you talk about the crossover between technology and still the human involvement, right? I mean, the two have to work together. And when you think about training, even your technology or physical security measures are often as effective as your training, right?
Yes.
So that's something that I think there's a lot we can do.
Yes, and the training is absolutely essential. You just brought up another finding from that facial recognition study, which is the participants that did use facial recognition seemed not to have fully trusted it. They believed that it was less accurate than it actually was in that study, how we set it up. And so had they been trained, the difference between the people who were assisted and those who were not may have been even greater, because there was a distrust. Now, the problem with facial recognition all too often is there's too much trust. So you get a match and you look at them, and because the system says this is a match, you say, okay, that's a match. We're going to move forward with whatever needs to be done. Well, there's the edge cases that you need to be very, very careful about, right? And it should be only be treated as a lead generation to say, if I've got a known offender, and that's how most of these retailers are using the system, is a known offender database where someone's come in, committed a crime, and then that person's now enrolled. When that person comes back, they'll get a match. Well, there's these edge cases where they get a match and it's not the same person. So really, these systems should only be used for like lead generation, and then, proceed with the investigation as you would with any other investigation where you have a lead, but there's nothing that is, bulletproof, just absolutely solid with no error, right? Yeah. So sometimes you can err on the side of too much trust in any of these technologies. Same thing is true with any computer vision technology. So having that human in the loop is absolutely critical. Absolutely. And would love to dive deeper into some of these things in the future, because again, with these social experiments, I mean, there's so many layers to it, as you know, and also findings that are unexpected and things you weren't even testing in the first place. So I would love to have you back on our vlog in the future to perhaps dive deeper into one of these, but I really do appreciate the tour today. It was awesome. And for those of you who are not members of the LPRC, definitely look into this organization, because as you can see, and we only showed you a glimpse of it, there's so much for you here in terms of resources. So definitely look into it, and hopefully we'll see some of you at Impact next year. Thank you. Thank you so much, Corey.